Hi, I'm Michael Wargo, team pilot with FMS, and today we're going to do a video that is going to help you transition from a propeller aircraft to an EDF. I know a lot of you out there, especially after you get started, you're flying the high wings and the trainers, and you're really anxious to get into an EDF or a jet. There's a little bit of caution you need to have when you're going into this type of aircraft because it flies differently. It's not necessarily any harder to steer or do anything else like that. There's just a few kind of nuanced little things that you need to understand while you're flying and while you're trying to land. Number one, an EDF does not produce instant pull like a propeller-driven aircraft. Conversely, a turbine doesn't have it instant. It sometimes takes a second and a half or so for the motor to spool up. With a propeller, you add power, you get instant response. With an EDF, it's a bit slower. The other thing is, more often than not, there are jets with straight wings, but this has a swept wing. Well, you're used to flying your trainer, and here's what you're dealing with. Look, anywhere I go off here, you can see the plane just kind of wants to find some little semblance of balance. So the plane is being held up like this, everything's hanging below. And it's just very easy to deal with. Now, conversely, when we go to an EDF, not quite so stable. It balances pretty far back on the wing, a little more twitchy. It just doesn't hang there, and it doesn't want to always right itself. So it's going to be up to you to fly it. As soon as the plane starts moving at any speed, it stays nice and constant, and it'll feel the same. It's just flying. The thing is, when you start getting slower, it gets a little more risky, and I'll show you how everything works. Okay. All right, the one big for instance with a high wing plane, and it's a really important part of this, is making a turn. See, I can make a turn and pull almost to the point of stall, and the plane just comes around really nicely. Conversely, if I have a EDF and I make a turn that slow, it is literally going to fall out of the sky. A jet or an EDF, if you fly slow enough, it turns from an aircraft into a manhole cover. It will fly like that in an instant. It will not resemble an airplane at all. It will just fall out of the sky. So the big key to flying an EDF is right as you're getting into the turn, you're about to start, at least accelerate the throttle a third and accelerate around the turn. And I don't know if you can hear the motor. I'll try and do it right here, low to the ground. Now listen to the motor going across that turn. And I'm powering into the turn, and it comes along just fine. So when you're flying your EDF, when you're making a turn, if you make a turn like this and you're tentative and trying to stay slow, the plane will stall. It'll tip stall, and one of the wings will fall. And as soon as that thing starts twirling into the ground, it's pretty much unrecoverable. Of course, you can always recover if it's high enough, but for the most part, it's very dangerous to make a slow turn. And I have seen people, even with giant turbines, pretty experienced pilots, when they get a little nervous, they get a little slow on the turn. And the other thing to note when turning an EDF as opposed to a plane like this is I want you to watch how quickly I can make a turn. Look how sharp. Like that, or an aerobatic plane, look, boom, no problem. I can turn really sharp. With an EDF, a jet, you shouldn't. So the biggest mistake I see people make is they make constant sharp turns. So if you want to turn around, you can turn around fairly sharp. As long as you have power, you can make a broad turn like that and never have a problem. If you start making turns like this, you're risking the aircraft every time you do that. The other thing to be aware of is the fact that this plane here is very lumbering from left to right, always wants to kind of right itself like I showed you when I was holding the wing. But with an EDF, it's a completely different animal because, again, you need a little speed. The flight controls don't deflect as much. You need speed to do anything. You need speed to hold the plane up in the air. You need speed to do aerobatics. And you need speed to be able to really accurately control the aircraft. And that is pretty much the things you have to concern yourself with. Now with this plane, I can do a relatively short landing approach. Because of the high wing, it's slowing down really good. And it's just a lot easier to control, a lot easier to spot land, like we're doing it in front of us. But with an EDF, it's a bit more of a challenge, and I'll explain why. Okay, a great piece of information that I hadn't thought to give you, but Tom here is a full-scale captain on a 737, so he thought it was important that I mention to you that on a straight wing like this, when the plane gets so slow it stalls. It stalls from here. The airflow is very straight, and it is inherently more stable, and you will continue to have some control over your ailerons. And that's important because on a swept wing like this, the airflow, because it's swept, is a little at this angle. So what happens is this stalls at the tip. It's the tip that's responsible for the stall. Therefore, you lose complete control of your ailerons really fast. That's what makes stalling so much more dangerous with a swept wing like this. So, again, this has a little dihedral built in it that makes it a little more inherently stable. This does not. So the moral of this story is, just by nature, everything about this is going to be a little more stable when you fly it. You have to fly this with a little more speed, a little more confidence, and you've got to be ahead of the plane a little more. You can't let this plane fly you as much as you can let this one. Stalling even on takeoff is an issue if you don't take off with enough power. So with an EDF, all the power you can muster going up, don't hold anything back. It's pointless. And my suggestion, as always, is let the plane lift off. Make sure it has enough speed. The mistakes I see with these is, as soon as it starts going what you think is a little fast, you hit elevator, it leaves the ground, hits the air, slows down, and stalls. So in order to avoid that, you can only do it one of two ways: speed or angle of attack. You either stay straight or make sure you have speed. If it's an EDF that's a little underpowered, some of the fastest ones are the least, have the least amount of power at slow speeds. So if you're just leaving the ground, don't turn up straight up right away. I know you see it on videos all the time, but it's not a good idea. Most of the time they're pretty grotesquely overpowered these days, but as a rule, with an EDF, leave it on the ground and let it get some speed. And if it is like today on grass or something with small wheels, or it's a little underpowered, start with that first level of takeoff flaps, which is what I'm going to do right now. You don't have to worry about it much with the high wing. And stay straight. Big deal. Stay straight after takeoff. Don't immediately climb too high. All right. Here's a demonstration of the turn with an EDF. Here's a relatively slow turn, but I'm still going to power into the turn. Ready? It's going slow. Power into the turn, and I'm safe. Now I'm going to take it up high, and I'm going to kind of stall it and give you an idea of what it's going to look like when the tip stalls. Okay, cut the power. You see the wing drop? That's a stall. To get out of it, you simply have to just point the nose down and get some air flowing over the wing, and then you can break the stall and you can just fly out. Another thing you have to be kind of concerned with this is the fact that a propeller pulls the plane through the air, and this pushes the airplane through the air. And the way the plane responds to everything is a little bit different when it's pulled. When it's pulled, you have prop wash that goes over the flight controls. So when you're going really slow like this, and with a propeller airplane and you accelerate, you get a lot of control over the ailerons and so on and so forth. Like if you're only going 10 miles an hour and you accelerate instantly, you have the same amount of control as, let's say, 40 miles an hour, because the prop wash is going over the flight controls. With this, as you slow down, you have less and less control over the flight controls. I'm waggling the ailerons and the plane's doing almost nothing. Like, you can't do a stall turn with the jet, because once you get up there, watch, the flight controls do nothing but just wag around a little bit. So they're just flailing and have absolutely no effect whatsoever. It'll feel like you have, like you've lost radio control. So when you get slow, understand that a jet, there's no prop wash, nothing is controlling the aircraft except air flowing over the controls and air flowing over the wings. And when you push the throttle hard with no speed, you don't have the benefit of the increased control until the plane gets some airspeed, like right now. So if you're going slow and you hit the throttle, my recommendation is to stay straight for just a little bit, and as soon as you get some airspeed, you can start turning or doing anything else you want to do. Last but not least, before we get to landing, is make sure you have plenty of expo on an EDF, because normally it's going a little fast. The swept wing, it's tinier, a little more twitchy and touchy. So that means you have to be a little more vigilant in your flight control setups. Either keep the rates down or make sure you add enough expo. Okay, I am going to land. And again, big difference. Mistakes. First, I'm going to show you where the mistakes are made.
Landing, takeoff, flap.
Mistakes are made here on that first turn. See them fall out of the sky? Mistakes are made here because they're too slow. So that's where the danger of being too slow and not powering into the turn a little bit. It's a little bit different with turbines, but with the EDFs, you can still power into the turns. Now I'm going to apply full flaps here. And here's what it looks like. Power into this turn a little bit, fly a little further out than the other. We're going to power into this turn just a little bit. And we want to land possibly even with a little bit of power, depending on the jet. Long and smooth. Now, as you can see, I landed a little faster. I landed a little too fast. I was kind of trying to stay a little faster on purpose. But it's important that you have a longer approach. It's important that you are low to the ground. I'm going to show you the two biggest mistakes that we make with coming in at the right speed. This is what I consider a terrible EDF landing. And by the way, we should always take off and land on high rates so we have that extra control if we ever need it. I see guys fly. I'm already over the end of the runway and that plane is super high. Now to come down, big mistake. You see how fast the aircraft is going? And then it gets hard to slow it down. So we're going to do a go around. With an EDF, it's very important, if you don't have a really nice approach going and it feels perfect, just go around. And always make sure you have enough battery to make it down. We're going to go further out. Another mistake we can make is coming here and having way too much power. Don't be afraid for it to slow down, and just don't let it go down. Don't let the speed go down too fast. A lot of it is feel and a lot of it is experience. At first, you're probably a little safer being a little faster. This is what I'm going to consider a perfect approach. We're going long. Nice turn in. Good altitude. Plane is not going to get too much speed coming down. Now I'm going to cut my power, let it settle in, and as I'm getting closer to ground, I'm going to flare a little bit, keep it off the ground, and there you go.